So I've recently been using a tool called Grammarly with my students. And we use the free version, which highlights accuracy mistakes like grammatical errors, inappropriate punctuation, misspellings. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by how accurate it was. So I've begun asking students to run their essays through Grammarly and reflect on the kinds of mistakes it discovers. But then I received a complaint from one student because they'd watched a video by someone called Zoe Bee saying that Grammarly is rubbish, or garbage, as they say over there. And I thought I should investigate, and so I did. So a disclaimer, I have nothing to do with Grammarly, and actually when I asked them for a free preview of their paid version, they didn't even get back to me. Anyway, back to the video. Zoe's clearly a smart cookie. She has experience, she loves language, she knows a thing or two, and I'm sure I could learn something from her. But I think that not all, but most of her arguments are straw men. She's complaining that an axe doesn't chop down a tree if you hold it by the blade, if that makes any sense. And somewhat ironically, while she complains that Grammarly promises too much, so does the title to her video. So, for my future students and anyone else interested, these are the issues she identifies and why they do little to convince me that Grammarly cannot be a useful learning tool, aka not garbage. So let's start with her biggest complaint.
By far, my biggest issue with Grammarly, though, is the fact that it even exists. Its existence is predicated on the assumption that there are right and wrong answers to language questions. But very often, there aren't. Language is fluid, things change, and grammar is squishy. Who even decides which things are mistakes to begin with? Seriously, what authority is there? If language is a communication device, then as long as you can communicate successfully, why should there be any other metrics of correctness? What is correct in one context could be completely wrong in another. Why is Grammarly the authority on what is right or wrong in a given context?
So she says that language is fluid, there are no right answers, and there is some truth to this. English evolves over time, and there are differences between Englishes. Garbage and rubbish, closet and wardrobe, potato, potato. Okay, no one says potato. Of course, in the academic world that I'm interested in, certain style guides will have their own rules for some things. But, and it's a big but, let us not overstate the case. There is plenty that is just plain. If we can't say wrong, then it's weird and it's unusual and it's inappropriate for the context. She complains that Grammarly is placing itself as the arbiter of correct English. But it's not. It's an AI designed to tell you what the norms are for the language. And that's exactly what I do with my students and what all teachers do with their students. If my student writes, "This paper discusses about machine learning," then I will tell that student that we don't use about with discusses. We talk about, but we just discuss with no following preposition. You can say it's not wrong, but it's unusual, and all editors would remove it, and all examiners would penalize you for it. And it's more, rather than less likely, to cause confusion. And perhaps that is the key point. And blaming Grammarly for telling people about the widely accepted norms of how language is used is not very fair, if we're honest. Alrighty, next one.
The thing about learning grammar is that it's actually really counterproductive to just have our errors pointed out to us.
Grammarly then is not useful as a learning tool. So what she really means is that if you simply accept Grammarly's suggestions without educating yourself on why you made the error, you won't learn anything and you won't improve as a writer. And that's true. Of course it's true. Grammarly is a tool and like any other, if you don't use it well, it won't be as effective. But there are a million different reasons why someone might use a tool like Grammarly, and how they use it should depend on what they're using it for. As I said earlier, I get my students to reflect on common errors it throws up related to accuracy, and then we go through them. It's useful to know where your weaknesses lie, because then you can focus on them and correct them. If students fail to do that, then of course they won't learn anything. But then that's true of any kind of feedback, whether from a teacher or from an AI. Okay, the last one then.
Many of the things that Grammarly marks as incorrect just aren't.
Grammarly is sometimes wrong. This is true, although the free version usually misses errors rather than making inaccurate suggestions, which is less problematic in my view. But in my investigation around 6 months ago, and remember it's improving all the time, 80 to 90% of the suggestions were correct, which makes it very useful for my students, who are non-natives mostly, and make quite a few accuracy errors. They can see where their weaknesses lie quite effectively. So the core of my issue with her video is that pretty much every criticism she makes could be made of a human teacher and a human teacher's feedback. I very much doubt that she avoids pointing out common inaccuracies in her students' work. I doubt she avoids pointing out informality in their academic writing. And I doubt that from the day she began teaching, she's never changed her mind about anything or come to consider something she was telling students to be grey or perhaps even wrong. So if it's not obvious, I would say that Grammarly is useful, but that you need to use it properly depending on your level and your intentions. And if your aim is to improve, you need to engage with the suggestions and read the explanations, and if necessary, consult an expert like a teacher. And also, just accept that from time to time the advice might just be wrong. So I hope that was useful. Please like and subscribe, unless you're one of my students, because then I'll just make you watch the other videos anyway. It's a joke. You should like and subscribe too.